You could have made nice with me, and that has led to all of this. I'll be waiting.
Longlegs is a new horror film directed by Oz Perkins, and it stars Makia Monroe as a young FBI agent named Lee Harker, and Lee gets assigned to a decades-old unsolved serial killer case where the serial killer is only known as Longlegs. And honestly, that's all I'm going to give you for a synopsis because I don't want to spoil anything for this movie. I went in pretty blind to this film, and I think that was the best way to go into this movie. So I will say that if you know nothing about the Longlegs film, don't research it, don't look into it, just go in blind and you will have a better time, I promise. But the other thing I will say before getting my positives and negatives is that the serial killer in this movie is played by one of my favorite actors of all time, Nicolas Cage. And he has been on a hot streak lately. And for me, the streak continues because wow, was he just intense, crazy Nicolas Cage in this film. And I loved it. But with that said, let's get into my positives and some of my negatives for Longlegs. My first positive for this movie is going to be the incredibly unhinged performance from Nicolas Cage. And listen, if Nicolas Cage is in a movie, most of the time I'm going to talk about his acting because regardless of the film that he is in, Nicolas Cage always gives it 110%. You can't deny him that. And in this movie, he really goes for the unhinged serial killer that they needed for Longlegs. He is crazy, he is horrific, and he's just terrifying to look at. He looks nothing like Nicolas Cage. Like, Nick Cage was just in Sympathy for the Devil, and I was like, that's Nick Cage right there. That's 100% him. That looks just like this movie. He is under so much makeup and he just transforms into this role that you don't see Nicolas Cage on screen. You see the Longlegs killer. And I thought that was such a great thing that they were able to do because Nicolas Cage, I mean, let's be honest, he sticks out like a sore thumb in just about everything he's in because he's Nicolas Cage. But in this movie, I never once saw him as Nicolas Cage from Face Off. I saw him as the Longlegs killer. My next positive for this movie is going to be the camera work. I thought the camera work was done phenomenally in this film. There was these aspect ratios they would shrink down to for older scenes, but then when it would break into what's going on right now, the aspect ratio would change. That was pretty unique and cool, but I also really liked how they had these long shots of the scenes that you were watching, and the camera wouldn't move around with the actors, and so you were kind of just stuck there watching these scenes from one point of view, and because of that, you kind of felt like maybe you were watching the characters or you were the eyes of the serial killer watching the characters. At least that's what I got out of it. That's not necessarily what the director was intending, but again, I thought the camera work in this movie was done really well. My final positive for this movie is going to be the tense and unnerving atmosphere throughout this entire film. It was just unsettling to sit there and watch some of these events unfold. Like, again, you go into this movie blind and you really don't know where it's going, and it opens with a little girl talking to the Longlegs killer, and you can kind of guess where that's going, and so it's just unnerving at first, but then every scene of this movie finds a way to feel unsettling. Whether it's the camera work or the sound design that they're using for that particular scene, everything in this movie feels unsettling. It feels unnerving. Again, at least for the first half of the film. Now, I've heard a lot of people compare this movie to Silence of the Lambs, and I will say that I understand the comparison to Silence of the Lambs when you have a serial killer that is hyper-focused on the female FBI agent that's on his case. I kind of understand that, but I also understand just the creepy, unsettling atmosphere of that entire movie was really pulled into at least the first half of this movie. Now, I keep saying the first half of this movie because when things start to get revealed, it becomes, for me, a little less unsettling, a little less unnerving. And by the end of the film, I didn't know if I agreed with the direction they decided to go when telling this story. And that will lead me to my negatives. First negative I have for this movie is going to be the supernatural element that they involve in this film, and I think that was the wrong way to go. Now listen, I'm not the writer or director of this film, and so it's not my film to decide where it goes, but as the audience member watching it and saying that that first half of the movie was so effective for me, so unnerving, so unsettling, just thinking about it now with a whole open space behind me is kind of creepy. The Longlegs killer could be anywhere sort of a feeling, but then when you get to the back half of this movie and you kind of find out how the Longlegs killer was doing those different serial killings, and they introduced the supernatural element, and I'm really trying to be spoiler free here, so That's all I can really say. But when they do that, I didn't feel as unnerved anymore. Like that all sort of dropped off for me. And I was kind of like, once the curtain was pulled away and they showed you what they were trying to tell you in this movie, I was just kind of like, oh, well, it's not as unsettling as I had hoped it'd be. And maybe that's just me. Maybe I wanted a more straightforward cat and mouse FBI agent serial killer movie. And that's, again, what I thought we were getting, because that was the setup for the first half of this film. And the back half of this film, it's definitely not that anymore. And again, once that's revealed to you, it just changes. And I can't explain it. It changed my whole thought process on this movie. I went from, oh, this is an interesting cat and mouse game, to what are they going to do with this thing? Oh, that's the route that they went. All right, that's fine, I guess. And that leads me to my other negative of this film, and that is that the film left me wanting more, but not in a good way. So before you jump into the comment section, you're like, aha, I left you wanting more. That means it was effective. That means it worked. To be clear, it was effective and it did work for me, but it left me wanting more in a negative way, like in a way where I wish I had gotten more of the first half of that film instead of what they ended up giving me. I wish that under the surface of this movie that was so clever and so tense and so unsettling that when you got under the surface and you pulled back that cover, I wish they had given me more of that first half of the film. And again, they just go down a different route that I can't spoil here, but it was a bit disappointing when you got to the back half of this movie. Overall, I think that if you like slow burn horror movies that have a supernatural element and a real life serial killer element sort of forced together, then I think you'll enjoy this movie. And that's not to say that I didn't enjoy myself. This is a movie that I think I need to watch again. So would I recommend that you see this one in the theater? That's an interesting question, because on the one hand, if you're there for the sound design and you're there for the aspect ratio constantly changing throughout this film, if you're at a decent enough theater, this might be the one to see in theaters just for those two elements alone. However, if those things don't affect you, maybe you've got surround sound at home, maybe you've got a big enough TV at home, you could watch this one at home, and I think you might enjoy it more at your house, only because the unsettling nature of a movie that deals with breaking and entering when you're watching in your home, that always affects me more at home. So I would recommend you watch this one on streaming. So it's just kind of back and forth, dealer's choice, whatever works for you. But guys, those are just my opinions because that's my review for Longlegs. Guys, have you had a chance to check out Longlegs yet? If you have, let me know in the comment section down below what your thoughts are. Maybe we agree or disagree on some things. Maybe this one completely worked for you and it's the scariest movie you've ever seen. Or maybe you're like me and you're like, there's some elements that really worked and I wish they had done more of. And there's some elements I wish they had not leaned into at all. And if you're just like that, maybe we're twins. With that said though, guys, if you like this review and you want to watch more, don't forget to hit that like button because it helps the video, it helps the channel, and it helps me right here. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time. All right, guys, we got to the end of my Longlegs review, and I loved watching this movie. I really did. I want to take this movie in again. I'm not going to go see it a second time in theaters. I will wait till it's streaming somewhere. Or maybe if it, drops on Blu-ray, I'll check that out. And I do want to give this another shot before the end of the year because I feel like this movie could go way up in my ranking or could drop way lower, just depending on how I feel now that I know the things that have been revealed. That's my personal opinion. We've already done the review. With that said though, guys, if you like this and you want to check out more of the content on my channel, well, I've got all of my horror movie reviews right there. And I've got all of my 2024 movie reviews right there.